Okay, so today we are going to add, subtract, and multiply with the letter I today. Or in this case, it's going to be complex numbers. So complex numbers, they are written in the form of A plus BI. A is going to be our real numbers, and BI is going to be the imaginary component to the complex number. So let's start pretty simple here. Let's look at question 1. If I have 1i plus 6i, that would give me a total of 7i, right? But if we look at question 2, you'll notice that we have two components. We have a real component, 3 plus 4, that is 7, and then we have an imaginary component, that is 6i. And you want to write the real component first, the imaginary component second, and that puts it in the A plus BI form. But what happens whenever we start to get a little more complex, like number 7? Well, we have a -1 we have to distribute here. We're actually going to apply the -1 rule, and when we do that, it simply changes the signs inside of the parentheses. So let's combine our real numbers, -3 and 5. Well, -3 plus 5 is 2. That is my real component to the complex number. Let's combine our imaginary numbers. +6 plus 3 is 9i, but 9i minus 8i is going to be positive I, or positive 1i. But let's get down to some multiplying here. So when we multiply, we're going to do 4i times 2. So you're going to do 4 times -2. I'm sorry. That would be -8. Bring down the I. Now we'll do 4 times -8. That is -32. But I times I is I squared. Now when you're working with imaginary numbers, there's one rule that you need to know, and that the value of I squared is actually -1. So what we can do is we can substitute the value of I squared for -1. It would look like this. -8i minus 32 times -1. See how I'm substituting the value of I squared? -32 times -1, that's positive 32. Bring down the -8i, but we actually want to write the real number first and then the imaginary number second. Now if you go back into this example and you look up here, and I'll highlight that in yellow, if you look up here, if you know that I squared is equal to -1, you can actually apply the -1 rule by crossing out I squared and simply changing the sign in front of the number, and it'll automatically give you your answer right here. You just need to rewrite it with the real number first, the imaginary number second. All right, let's look at 13. 13 requires us to do a multi-distribution, so here we go. -2 times 4 is -8. -2 times I, -2i. We need to distribute again. -I times 4 is -4i. -I times positive I. So if I were to insert a couple ones there, -1 times positive 1 is -1. I times I is I squared. So remember, I squared is the same as -1. And if I were to just assume that there's a -1 for I squared already written right here, a -1 times a -1 is actually going to turn that into a positive 1. So when you do that, you can actually drop the I squared. Let's combine our real numbers. -8 plus 1 is -7. Combine your imaginary numbers. -2i minus 4i is -6i. Okay, let's look at one more problem here. Let's look at 15. 7i times 3i times parentheses. You could distribute here and here first and then multiply times 7i. Or you could rewrite this as 7i times 3i times negative 8 minus 6i. And then just work left to right. 7 times 3 is 21. I times I is I squared. And we said I squared is negative 1. So if I were to do negative 1 times 21, that would actually be negative 21. We're going to take that number and multiply it times the last piece that we have here. So here we go, negative 21 times 8. That's going to give me a positive number. 8 times 1 is 8, times 2 is 16. And then one more time, we need to multiply negative 21 times negative 6. It's going to give me a positive number. It gives me 126. Don't forget about the little I here. We have our real component and our imaginary component, so we have a complex number.